So I watched Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse a few days ago, and I thought it was pretty solid. I really enjoyed hanging out with these characters again, especially seeing the relationship between Miles and Gwen develop. The fact that Lord and Miller have been able to draw out such tangible chemistry between those characters within the dense and absurd concept that is the multiverse should be applauded. I mean, in the span of 2 movies, they've done it better than the MCU has in 10 movies and 15 TV shows. I don't think it's quite as good as the first movie, mainly because that one was so economical in its storytelling. I mean, it just didn't let up. Every scene pushed the story forward in a meaningful way, while simultaneously fleshing out the characters. Whereas in Across the Spider-Verse, it takes about 40 minutes for the plot to really kick into action. I didn't mind that we got to spend that extra time catching up with Miles just doing normal Spider-Man stuff before diving into the multiverse, but I didn't feel like I learned much more about him that I didn't already know. Once we get into the stuff with the Spider Society though, it's fantastic. So it goes without saying that I had a fun time, and I'm intrigued about where the second part is going. But that's not what this video is about. You already know the movie's good. I mean, it's got the highest rating ever on Letterboxd right now. Blah blah blah. No, here I just wanted to talk about a concept explored in the film that really sparked my interest, and that's the idea of fate versus free will. So the main conflict that we see play out in Across the Spider-Verse is between Miles and Miguel O'Hara, aka Spider-Man 2099. Basically, Miguel runs an alliance of all these different versions of Spider-Man from across the multiverse, and he's discovered that they all share certain life experiences in common. He calls these canon events. For example, the death of a mentor figure such as Uncle Ben occurs in the career of every Spider-Man variation.
Uncle Ben! No! Call an ambulance!
Miguel and the rest of the Spider Society use an algorithm to detect when and where these canon events are going to happen. They don't want anyone to interfere with the canon because that could trigger the collapse of the entire multiverse. In essence, Miguel believes in fate, that events are set in stone and can't be altered. On the contrary, Miles Morales believes in free will. When Miguel tells him that his dad is going to be killed in 2 days, naturally Miles wants to prevent it from happening, and rebels against the Spider Society to save him. He rejects the idea that he can't save both his dad and the multiverse. This is a classic Spider-Man dilemma. You either save Mary Jane or the kids in the bus. The difference here is that Miles is being told that he actually has zero choice in the matter, that events are supposed to play out in a certain way, and he just has to fall in line with them. This culminates in Miguel revealing that Miles was never supposed to be bit by the spider, and that he's an anomaly. To me, this is the main theme of Across the Spider-Verse, fate versus free will, and it got me thinking. So I'll just give a brief explanation of what the debate surrounding free will and fate, or determinism as it's often referred to, actually is. In the day-to-day lives of most people, we assume that we have free will. That is, that every choice we make is our own, and that we're solely responsible for it. Let's say you have to choose between eating an apple or an orange for a snack, and you end up choosing the apple. The belief that you could have chosen the orange instead is you assuming that you have free will, that both choices were possible. Now, several philosophers and physicists going back hundreds of years have rejected this idea, including Einstein and Baron de Holbach. Einstein famously said, "God does not play dice with the universe," and posited that everything, including the actions of humans, was determined by cause and effect. In the same way that rainfall makes plants grow, there are internal factors that lead us to making even the most insignificant of choices. Einstein and Holbach were what are known as hard determinists. Hard determinism is the belief that free will is an illusion, and that our choices are determined by forces outside of our control, namely our nature and nurture. Essentially, nature is everything that you were predisposed to before you were born, and influences things like your physical appearance. Whereas nurture is your environment, where you were raised, how your parents treated you, who you grew up with. A few years back, there was this documentary that came out called 3 Identical Strangers. It covered the lives of 3 identical twins who were separated at birth and raised in completely different environments. One of them had affluent parents, one was raised middle class, and the other was raised by a blue-collar family. Of course, this was all done intentionally by researchers who wanted to better understand whether nature or nurture had more of an impact on the development of human beings. Whilst the study was seriously unethical, the results were fascinating. On the surface, the twins had a lot in common. They smoked the same brand of cigarettes, they all had competed in wrestling, and liked the same types of food. But in reality, there were vast differences, with one tragically committing suicide in his 30s. Overall, the documentary suggests that nurture has more of an influence over who we are. But this is really the core belief of hard determinists. If everything that influences our decisions comes from factors that are outside of our control, nature and nurture, then how could we possibly have free will? Naturally, the concept of determinism seems pretty nihilistic. The idea that our fates are sealed and there's nothing we can do to change the course of our lives. That said, there are a couple works of fiction that I'm a fan of that have dealt with this concept in a thoughtful and well-rounded way. The first that comes to mind is Dave Gibbons and Alan Moore's Watchmen. Even if you haven't read the comic or watched the movie before, you've probably heard of Dr. Manhattan. He's basically a depressed version of Superman who's like 5 times more powerful. Among other abilities, he has the power to experience all of time all at once. He can see into his past and his future, and thus, he knows the outcome of every event in advance. Throughout the book, he appears entirely disconnected from his humanity. Because he knows the future, he sees everyone as a puppet. He's just a puppet who can see the strings. This shapes his nihilistic perspective, and he sees the world as insignificant, a speck of dust in the enormity of the universe. But towards the end of the story, he has a change of heart. Basically, he's living on Mars, and he teleports one of the other characters, Laurie, there, to make her case for why he should be invested in humanity. In a horrifying moment for her, she realizes that her real father is the comedian, a man who had once assaulted her mum. It's revealed that her mum later had a consensual relationship with him that resulted in Laurie. This spurs Dr. Manhattan to understand just how absurd the world really is, that a chain of events so illogical would play out for Laurie to exist. He can only describe it as a miracle. He says, "The world is so crowded with these miracles that they become commonplace, and we forget. I forget." In a book that is pretty grim for the most part, it's a surprising moment of hope and a rejection of nihilism. Personally, I don't know what to make of the debate over free will and fate. No one knows for sure if we have free will over our decisions or not. But would we even want to know? If there was a scientific consensus that our choices are wholly influenced by factors out of our control, it would have huge implications for everything. Maybe in this case, it's best if we stay blissfully ignorant. There's certainly some solid research to support determinism. But I don't know. A person shouldn't believe in an ism. He should believe in himself. Okay, finally getting to the point. The reason why I called this video Across the Spider-Verse makes no sense is because from what Miguel tells us about the rules of the multiverse and canon events, it opens up a lot of weird contradictions. Now, in the next movie, it may well be revealed that Miguel has been lying to Gwen, Peter B, and the rest of the Spider Society, and that he's made up this threat to the multiverse for some sinister motive. Gwen even kind of foreshadows this when she asks him, "Do you know for sure what happens if Miles breaks the canon?" However, for the purpose of this video and the concepts I'm talking about, I'm going to take what Miguel has said about the multiverse at face value. So, in the Mumbadan sequence where Miles fights the Spot, there's a moment where Gwen gets an alert from her AI that says incoming canon event. Gwen learns that a police officer is going to die, and that's going to be a significant moment for this universe's Spider-Man. However, Miles ends up saving the cop, which seemingly causes a black hole to open in that world. When Miles meets Miguel, he tells him that he wasn't supposed to save that cop, and that he wasn't supposed to be there. Now, here's the thing. That cop would never have been in danger if Miles hadn't created the Spot, and Spot hadn't transported himself into Mumbadan. That canon event wouldn't have ever been a possibility if it weren't for Miles. Furthermore, if predetermined canon events are what binds the multiverse together, then how was Miles an anomaly in the first place? If Miles is also tied to a universe with those same deterministic rules, how could he be interfering with fate? Wouldn't it have always been his fate to be bitten by the spider from the alternate universe? So yeah, the movie is digging into this huge concept of free will, and I think Lord and Miller are one step ahead, and there's going to be a larger reveal in the next movie that ties up all these plot holes, for lack of a better term. And even if they don't, it doesn't really matter, because the movie has set up a really interesting dilemma for Miles. If he wasn't supposed to become Spider-Man, who is he really? It's a great concept, and it's sort of like Rian Johnson's Looper, where the mechanics of time travel make absolutely no sense, but you can still appreciate the story that's being told. So to wrap up this tangent of a video essay, I think it's cool that Spider-Verse opens up discussions like this, and makes you engage with its ideas. The creators could have easily cashed in on Spider-Man being so popular right now, and just made some crowd pleaser that relies on nostalgia, rather than adding any new ideas of its own. Not that that's ever happened before. Anyway, I would say thank you for staying to the end of the video, but if you were always meant to watch the video all the way through, I don't really see the point.